Okay, so we've gotten a ton of requests from you guys to cover this whole thing with Trump and his claims about, well, territorial expansion. I mean, it's pretty wild stuff, right? We're talking about Canada, Greenland, even the Panama Canal.
Yeah, it's certainly got everyone talking.
Yeah, no kidding. He even wants to rename the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America. I know, right? Talk about bold claims. So, for this deep dive, we've got a really fascinating set of articles that lay out all the details.
Right.
And, we're going to try to unpack all this and figure out what it all means for the U.S. and the world, really.
Yeah, it's a big one for sure.
It is. So, I guess the first question is, what do you make of all this?
Yeah.
Where do we even begin?
Well, I think the first thing to note is that this is causing a major stir internationally.
Right.
These aren't just off-the-cuff remarks,
Yeah.
The statements are prompting some pretty serious discussions about the future of U.S. foreign policy.
I bet.
World leaders aren't just raising eyebrows, they're pushing back hard.
I can imagine. I mean, Canada is the 51st state. Come on.
Right.
He even called Trudeau governor.
Yeah, that didn't go over so well.
No, I don't think so.
Trudeau's response was pretty clear. Not a snowball's chance in hell.
Ouch.
And it's not just Canada.
Right.
Panama's reaction to the idea of the U.S. taking back the canal was equally strong.
Yeah.
They basically said, our canal sovereignty is absolutely not negotiable.
So we're seeing some really strong reactions all over the place.
Absolutely.
What do you think is driving these claims? I mean, is this just Trump being Trump, or is there something more strategic going on here?
Well, there are a few different theories out there.
Okay.
Some people say it's just political posturing,
Right.
Playing to a specific voter base who like this strongman image.
Hmm.
Others believe he genuinely wants to reshape U.S. foreign policy and assert American dominance on the world stage.
Interesting.
And then there's the idea that it's all a negotiation tactic.
Okay, how so?
Start with these extreme demands to gain leverage in future deals.
Ah, I see.
It's kind of like a starting point
Right.
to get people to the table.
It's a good point.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he has pulled off some unexpected moves in the past,
He has.
especially with the trade deals. He definitely likes to shake things up.
He does, but this is different.
Agreed, though.
We're talking about international relations here,
Right.
and this has the potential to cause some serious global instability.
Yeah, I guess even if these claims are just rhetoric, they've already caused damage.
Oh, man. Exactly.
Because it makes other countries question the U.S.'s commitment
Right.
to international agreements and partnerships.
Exactly. It raises concerns about violating international borders.
Yeah.
And the impact on global stability, German Chancellor Scholz has been pretty vocal about this, for example.
So even if nothing actually happens, these statements have consequences.
Absolutely.
It's like he's thrown a grenade into the room, and even if it's a dud, everyone's still freaking out.
That's a good analogy. And it's not just about hurt feelings either.
Right.
This goes deeper to the principles of international law
Okay.
and the delicate balance of power in the world.
So let's dig into some specifics then.
Sure.
Greenland seems to be a particular focus for Trump.
Mm-hmm.
What's so special about this icy island anyway?
Well, it's not just about the ice.
Right.
Greenland holds a really significant strategic importance, especially when it comes to North Atlantic security.
Right. I was reading about the Pacific Space Base, the northernmost U.S. military base.
Yeah.
And its location is crucial for controlling that area they call the GIUK gap.
Right.
Between Greenland, Iceland, and the UK.
You got it. That stretch of ocean is a major shipping route.
Oh, I see.
Whoever controls it can essentially choke off naval traffic.
Wow.
Between the North Atlantic and the Arctic Ocean. So you can see why it's a big deal for NATO.
Right. Especially with all the tension with Russia lately.
Exactly. Russia's been increasing their presence in the Arctic.
Right.
So control over Greenland would give the U.S. a huge advantage there.
I'm starting to see why Trump's so fixated on it. But didn't he already try to buy it from Denmark a few years back?
He did in 2019.
Really?
Yeah, but it didn't go over well.
What happened?
Both Denmark and Greenland rejected the offer outright.
Wow.
They saw it as a blatant attempt to violate their sovereignty.
That's a pretty bold move.
Did it?
And speaking of bold moves, let's talk about the Panama Canal.
Okay.
Why is Trump so interested in getting it back under U.S. control?
Well, the Panama Canal is one of the most important shipping routes in the world.
I know it connects the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans, right?
Right. And a huge portion of global trade flows through it.
Especially Chinese shipping traffic, I bet.
Exactly.
So whoever controls it has serious leverage over global trade.
You got it. And this ties into the bigger picture.
What do you mean?
the growing economic and strategic competition between the U.S. and China.
Right. So it seems like these claims, whether they're serious or not, reveal a lot about Trump's worldview.
They do.
And his approach to foreign policy. He's definitely not afraid to shake things up.
He isn't. But the question remains, is he playing a dangerous game? Or is this all calculated for a bigger purpose?
That's a good question.
And that's something we'll delve into further as we continue our deep dive.
Okay. Sounds good. It's kind of crazy to think about all this, are we seeing like a whole new approach to foreign policy here? Or is this something that's always been there,
That's a really good question. And I think to really understand what's going on with Trump's statements, you kind of have to look back at the history of U.S. expansionism. I mean, it's a long and complex story.
Yeah.
Full of triumphs and tragedies.
So, what are some of the key moments in U.S. history that kind of shed light on all this?
Well, you have events like the Louisiana Purchase back in 1803, which doubled the size of the U.S.
Wow.
And then you have the Mexican-American War in the 1840s, which led to the annexation of huge territories in the Southwest.
Yeah, and those expansions were often framed as like manifest destiny, right? The belief that the U.S. was destined to expand across the continent.
Right. It was more than just a desire for land. It was like a powerful ideology that shaped American thinking for decades.
I've heard that term before, but I don't think I fully get it. What does manifest destiny really mean?
It was this idea that American expansion was inevitable, justified, and even divinely ordained.
Wow.
This belief fueled westward expansion, but it often came at a cost.
Yeah. I mean, it's easy to forget that this expansion wasn't just about empty land.
Right.
It was about displacing Native American tribes, taking land from Mexico. There was human cost to all of this.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And recognizing that human cost is really important. When we're looking at Trump's statements today, he talks about making America great again.
Yeah.
But that greatness was built on expansion that came at the expense of others. So it raises these kind of uncomfortable questions about what achieving that greatness might entail today.
So are you saying that Trump is just following in the footsteps of previous presidents who engaged in territorial expansion?
I mean, there are definitely some parallels in terms of rhetoric and ambition, but we have to remember the world is a very different place now.
Right.
Back then, there weren't the same international constraints on the use of force.
Right.
And the global community wasn't as interconnected as it is today.
Yeah, that's true. Today, any move toward territorial expansion would have massive global repercussions.
Absolutely.
Both economically and politically.
The international system is way more complex now.
Right.
Global public opinion plays a much larger role. Plus, you have social media. News travels instantly.
It does.
Any aggressive action would be met with immediate international condemnation.
So while Trump might be drawing inspiration from the past, the context he's operating in is totally different. Yeah. Which begs the question, what are the potential consequences of his claims for the U.S., even if they're just bluster?
Well, we've already talked about some of the political fallout.
Right. The U.S.'s relationships with Canada and the EU are already strained.
Right. And it's not just about hurt feelings either.
Right.
These actions have real consequences for international cooperation and global stability.
I can see how this would make other countries question the U.S.'s reliability as an ally and its commitment to international agreement.
Exactly. It creates uncertainty. And that uncertainty could embolden countries like Russia and China, who are already looking for opportunities to expand their influence.
So these claims could actually backfire on the U.S.
They could.
Making it harder to achieve its foreign policy goals in the long run.
Precisely. It's like trying to bully your way into a leadership position.
Right.
It might work in the short term, but it's going to create resentment and resistance down the line.
Okay, so we've talked about the political ramifications. But what about the economic impact? You mentioned that these territories are strategically important for global trade.
Right.
How could these territorial ambitions affect the global economy? And what does that mean for everyday people like you and me?
Well, just imagine the disruption if the flow of goods and services through these key areas were suddenly interrupted.
Right.
We're talking major supply chain disruptions, potential trade wars, even the possibility of military conflict.
That's scary.
All of this would lead to economic instability, which means higher prices, job losses, a decline in our overall standard of living.
Wow, that's a chilling thought. And it's not just a hypothetical scenario.
Right.
The global economy is so interconnected.
It is.
What happens in one part of the world has ripple effects everywhere.
Exactly. Take Canada, for example.
Okay.
The U.S. and Canada have a deeply integrated economy.
Yeah.
Any attempts to annex Canada would have a devastating impact on both countries, not to mention the global markets.
Right.
And then you have Greenland sitting on those vital shipping routes in the Arctic. Control over Greenland could give the U.S. immense leverage over Arctic trade,
Right.
potentially disrupting the flow of goods and resources.
And then there's the Panama Canal.
Right.
A crucial artery for global shipping.
Absolutely.
Especially for Chinese goods. Any disruption there would send shockwaves through the global economy.
It's like blocking a major highway during rush hour.
Oh, yeah.
The consequences would be felt far and wide.
Yeah, this is where it gets really personal.
It does.
Imagine the impact on your everyday life.
Right.
The prices of everyday goods could skyrocket. Your investments could take a hit.
Yeah.
Travel could become more difficult and expensive.
Absolutely.
So even though these territorial claims might seem far removed from our daily lives, they could actually have a very real impact on our wallets.
They could.
And our sense of security.
Absolutely. It's a stark reminder that we live in a globalized world.
Right.
And events on the other side of the planet can have a direct impact on our lives.
Okay, so we've talked about the potential political and economic fallout, but I'm curious about the media's role in all of this.
Okay.
How has the media covered these claims? And what impact has that coverage had on public opinion and the political discourse?
Well, as you might expect, these claims have generated a ton of media attention.
Right.
But the coverage hasn't always been nuanced or balanced.
So is the media just playing into Trump's hands, giving him the attention he craves? Or are they fulfilling their role of informing the public about these important developments?
It's a bit of both, to be honest.
Okay.
Some outlets have focused on the sensational aspects of the story,
Right.
playing up the shock value and potentially amplifying Trump's message.
Yeah.
Others have taken a more analytical approach,
Okay.
exploring the potential consequences of these claims and providing context.
And I imagine there's a lot of partisan bias in the coverage as well?
Absolutely. Outlets that are critical of Trump tend to portray his ambitions as reckless and dangerous, while those that are more supportive frame them as bold and visionary. This partisan framing just deepens the political divide and makes it harder for people to have a nuanced understanding of the situation.
So it sounds like the media is both informing and misinforming the public, shaping public opinion in ways that could be beneficial or harmful, depending on the outlet and their agenda.
Exactly. And it underscores the importance of being critical consumers of news. You can't just passively absorb information. You have to actively engage with it, question the source, and seek out diverse perspectives.
That's such an important point. We can't just rely on headlines and sound bites to understand complex issues like this. We need to dig deeper and think for ourselves.
I completely agree. And that's what makes this deep dive so valuable.
Yeah.
It allows us to go beyond the superficial and really explore the nuances and complexities of these territorial claims.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. We've looked at the historical context of U.S. expansionism, the potential political and economic consequences of Trump's claims, and the role of the media in shaping public perception.
We've explored how these claims, regardless of their feasibility, act as a stress test on the existing world order, exposing fault lines and highlighting the challenges ahead.
And we've emphasized the importance of critical thinking and informed citizenship in navigating this complex and uncertain landscape.
Now the question remains, what does the future hold?
Right.
What are the long-term implications of these territorial ambitions? Will they fade into obscurity? Or will they shape the global landscape for years to come?
That's a big question.
It is. And that's what we'll explore in the final part of our deep dive.
Welcome back to our final part of this deep dive into Trump's territorial ambitions. It's been a pretty wild ride, right? I mean, we've gone through the history and even talked about how this could hit our wallets.
Yeah, we've covered a lot of ground.
We have. So now I guess the big question is what does this all mean for the future?
It's like we're watching a slow motion earthquake.
Oh, wow. Okay.
You know, the ground is shifting and the old world order is crumbling. And Trump's claims, whether they actually happen or not, have sped up this process. And now we have to deal with the aftershocks.
So are we headed toward a more chaotic world where every country is just looking out for itself?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah.
There's no easy answer, and honestly, that's what makes this so fascinating.
Yep.
On the one hand, you see a resurgence of nationalism
Right.
and a rejection of global cooperation.
Yeah, it feels like a step backward in some ways.
It does. But there's also a counter-movement happening at the same time.
Mm.
We're seeing people all over the world demanding accountability, pushing for more sustainable solutions, and recognizing our interconnectedness like never before.
That's encouraging.
Yeah.
So maybe this chaos is like a necessary step toward building something better.
Maybe. But one thing's for sure.
What's that?
The U.S. can't just call all the shots anymore.
Right.
The old playbook of American dominance, it's outdated.
Yeah.
And honestly, other countries aren't buying it.
And what about global public opinion?
Mm-hmm.
Talk about strained relationships with allies, but how does the average person around the world view the U.S. now?
Well, it's a mixed bag.
Okay.
You have those who are deeply concerned by what they see as American recklessness.
Right.
And a disregard for international law.
Yeah.
They're looking for alternative partnerships and solutions.
And I imagine this has implications for American businesses.
Oh, yeah.
And cultural influence, too.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
The U.S. has enjoyed a certain level of soft power,
What do you mean by that?
That ability to influence through persuasion and attraction. But that's waning.
I see.
When trust is eroded, it's hard to win people over.
So even if the U.S. wanted to go back to business as usual, it might be too late.
Yeah. The damage might already be done. But, there's also an opportunity here.
Okay. What good?
For the U.S. to kind of reinvent itself. Embrace a more collaborative approach to global leadership.
That sounds like a tall order.
It is.
Especially in the current political climate.
Right. But remember, the future isn't set in stone.
Okay.
It's shaped by the choices we make.
Right.
Individually and collectively.
So you're saying it's not all doom and gloom?
Not necessarily.
Okay.
And that brings us back to you, the listener.
Right. We've thrown a lot of information at you in this deep dive.
I have.
But it's not just about understanding the facts.
It's about what you do with that knowledge.
Right. We've explored the complexities of global power dynamics, the interconnectedness of our world,
Right.
the potential consequences of one leader's actions.
It's a lot to take in.
It is. So now it's up to you to decide what kind of future you want to be a part of.
Will you be a passive observer?
Or will you actively engage in shaping the world around you?
Will you accept the status quo, or will you push for change?
These are tough questions. Yeah, there are no easy answers.
But that's the beauty of it.
What do you mean?
The future is ours to create. So keep asking questions, keep learning, and most importantly, keep engaging.
Right.
The world needs your voice.
Well, that brings our deep dive to a close. We hope you found it insightful.
Thought-provoking.
And maybe even a little bit empowering.
Remember, the choices we make today determine the world we inherit tomorrow.
Thanks for joining us on this journey.
We'll see you next time.